Helix wire part 2. On this coil, what we have there is that core wire is going to be 26 gauge Anarchist wire, which is just high quality Nichrome 80, and then that other wire wrapping around it is 32 gauge Kanthal. And so what you have here is both of those claptoned with 36 gauge Nichrome 80. And so it's just the same concept as Helix wire like you saw in the part 1 video. The only difference is that each of those individual wires are claptoned. And you end up with a lot of juice channels along this wire. And this coil ended up at 0.25 ohms. Right now it's firing at 75 watts, which is going to be right at like 4.2, 4.3 volts. And you can see Helix wire normally has all those juice channels between the twists. And claptoning each individual strand is going to give you even more surface area on this coil to hold on to liquid. And so as it heats up, you know, there's going to be juice all over this coil, and the flavor on this is just kind of silly. I've always really enjoyed these ever since the first one that I made, and you're really going to need like a 36 gauge or a really fine gauge of wire to do this, because the wires get really thick. When you clapton like a 32 around here, it's just not going to work. So that's the basic concept of this wire. Okay, so you just got a pretty thorough explanation of how this coil is going to work. It's clapton wrapped around different gauges of round wire and then Helix together. So some highlights in this video are going to be claptoning a really long piece of thin gauge wire. So in the video I claptoned about 1.5 feet of 32 gauge with 36 gauge Nichrome 80 around it. And then also I show how to clapton a single piece of wire without that clapton being really loose on there and just slipping right off. So I show how to make a really tight, compact clapton, and then some performance on this coil. Right now I've got it down at 60 watts on a single coil, and it lights up pretty instantaneously, even at just 3.8 volts. Came out to 0.24 ohm, 4 wraps around a 3/32 inch bit. Let me get this juiced up again. And it's a pretty versatile coil because you can turn the wattage up quite a bit. I'm just going to go ahead and turn it up to 80 watts, which brings it up right to the 4.5 volt range. And it still keeps up really well. And it's a pretty angry little coil when you first use it, but as it breaks in, it stops popping off all those little jets of liquid. So it's a pretty nice coil. You can do higher wattages or lower wattages, and if you could fit a 5 wrap on here, it'd probably be an okay candidate for a dual coil too. Especially if you have a high power regulated device. It should handle it pretty well. So I hope you enjoy the build video. If you have any questions, put them in the comments down below. I should have a timestamp to help jump around. Okay, for the next part of the build, I'm going to be claptoning some 36 gauge Nichrome 80 around some 26 gauge Anarchist wire. And I'm kind of going to go through this because when you're using clapton wire for a Helix coil, it's important to have that clapton wire really tight on there, and or else it's just going to slip right off when you try to stick it into the groove. So all I'm going to do is get some of this out of here. Shouldn't need a huge amount of it. I think that should probably be long enough. And then I know this spool of 36 gauge. It's a brand new one. It doesn't have a hole in the spool part. So what I do is I make a hole right here. just going to pull quite a bit of this out. And for me personally, I like to tug on it just to straighten it out as I go when I'm using this for Clapton. So I get a length out, and then I just give it a tug, stretch it a little bit, and that straightens it out. It makes it a little easier for me personally to Clapton with. And once I have enough, I'm going to cut it off with a little bit of length left over. And then I just stick this wire down through the center, up around the outside. And this looks kind of hard on video, but it's actually really easy to do at a normal angle. And just grab that, and so you're basically putting that through the actual loop, and then you can tighten it off, and it'll stay right there and won't unspool. So I'm going to do first is stick the 26 gauge into the drill to straighten it out as well before we get started on the Clapton part. Probably do the trick. And then I'm just going to grab that 36 gauge. And what I like about Nichrome 80 is that it's softer than Kanthal, so it's a little bit easier to work with, especially when doing Claptons in the 36 gauge size. And the problem with the Nichrome 60 is that it has so much iron in it that it just turns brown when it oxidizes, and it looks horrible. And also, a lot of people get kind of an iron or a metallic taste out of Nichrome 60. I never noticed it myself, but a lot of people complain about that. It's probably from the iron content. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and get this started. And once there's enough length away from that chuck of the drill and you can grab a hold of it, what I do is actually I'm going to go back over this again, back over the part that was just Clapton, and I want to get it really tight on this first part. Okay, now that's really tight on there, so that when we take this out and we're finished, it's not just going to slide off, because that's the main problem with single wire Clapton coil, is that the wire afterwards likes to slip around, and so it's hard to twist up afterwards, and it's hard to hard to do really anything with it without messing it up, including wrapping a coil. And then I'm just going to grab it, and Homeboy OC recently did a video on a fused Clapton, and the way that he holds it is he pushes this wire back against his finger, and I've really liked that. Instead of trying to hold the wire with your fingernail onto the wire, you just get it going back there, and as long as you're at the right angle, it should just keep going pretty much perfectly. Okay, so basically I didn't grab enough of that 36 gauge, so I'm going to have to redo this. But I just want to show you what I mean as far as Claptons. Normally, you can just pull them and it all stretches. So if you have a Clapton like this and you try to twist it up, you're going to end up with a real pain of trying to get it to not like expand and get uneven, just because it is loose in that core wire and it's like a spring right now. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and Clapton up again to almost to the end, and I'm going to show you something at the end. I'm just going to fast forward to the end of it and show you how to prevent that from happening and how to get it all totally compressed and super tight on that core wire. Okay, so all you do at the end here, now I have most of this wire Claptoned up, you just keep going, and then at the end, instead of stopping, you just let it continue and then let it just twist off on its own. So that very last little twist that it does, what happens is that it tightens up and creates tension on this. And you'll notice that this doesn't pull off no matter how hard I pull on it. I know I just pulled that top part off. That was pretty risky, but it looks like it's still holding. So yeah, I guess be careful when you're testing it. But I'm gonna pull this out and I'll just show you how tight it gets. So you have a nice tight wire, and that's not, I mean, it's not shifting at all. That clapton is on there. And so then what I do is I'm actually going to twist this up. So I don't want to cut it because if I cut it right now, it's likely that those pieces will start slipping off of there. So I'm just going to stick these ends right in the drill. Hopefully I'll just be able to get it in there without twisting them up or anything. And it looks like I got it. Okay, now the other end, I just stick a screwdriver in it and pull it real tight, and this is going to be our core wire for the Helix. So just pull it really tight so that it's all the tension is out and these wires are going to be twisting up evenly. And then just start twisting it. And that's about where I'm going to stop. You don't want to go to the maximum right now because we're going to actually helix in some other kind of wire, and it just makes it a lot easier to helix it in when it's not already twisted to the maximum. You'll be able to get a lot tighter at the end by twisting after you put the wire in there. So let me get the other wire ready. Okay, so basically in the angle that I was in, I was unable to clapton the 32 gauge with a 36. So I'm just in the most comfortable position for myself as far as how I normally hold this. And when you're claptoning wire around something like 32 gauge, you have to be really light with it. You can't be, because it's such a thin wire, there's not much support for you to bear down on here. So I'm going to do the same thing where at the beginning I just go over this first part quite a few times. Just to get a nice tight grip on there, and it adds a little bit of stability too to that 32. Now as we go out from there, all I'm going to be doing is barely holding it. I'm just basically leading that 36 gauge onto the 32, especially at the beginning here. And once we get it out far enough, I'm just barely touching it at all. I'm just guiding it onto that wire. Now, as I get going, it's going to get pretty loud, but basically you'll see this 32 start to wave around and stuff, and all you have to do is change the angle of the drill a little bit just to get that curvature going in a way that it's not going to be flopping around violently and uncontrollably. So let me get my earplugs on real quick because this drill is stupid. Alright. And so you'll notice I'll kind of change my movements as I go. But here we go. Right, and if done correctly, I mean, you should end up with that same kind of, the clapton is just on there. There's not a lot of give to it, and it's contained, within this whole thing is nice and tight. So now I've got two of these. I did one off camera, and I'll go ahead and show you how to helix those into the other wire. Okay, so basically we have this 26 gauge clapton with 36 twisted up, and I'm just going to clip off the ends here. Now that it's twisted, it's going to hold that clapton on there just by the pressure within those twisted wires, so it doesn't matter to clip it wherever. I'm just going to stick it into the drill. And then we have these 32s here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this bent end on the other side, and I'm going to start with the most uniform piece that we ended with. And like I said, it's nice and tight, so it's going to fit right into the drill here. And it should be pretty equivalent to the original build in the video. This should be pretty close to a 28 gauge width now, and then these wires should be pretty close to the 24 gauge. So I'm going to go ahead and get this going here. So once you're in the angle, it should just go right into that groove. Very similar to a clapton. And I'll do an up-close view after this. Just kind of show you what we'll be looking for. Oh, that'll keep it tight. So by twisting it off at the end like that, it actually keeps the tension on this wire, and it's going to allow us to use it again. But I'm going to go ahead and get up close for this next part. Okay, so you got the first wire in there, and it's wrapping around the groove there. I'm going to stick this second one into the chuck as well. Looks like I'm going to have to find a different hole. There we go. And you just want to find that groove that is opened up. I'm going to go around once and see if I can't get in one more time. Alright. And then find the groove that doesn't have a wire in it and see if we can't get it going. And make sure you're holding as much tension as you can on this. It's important to get as tight as you can because we're not going to be able to twist this much after we're finished here. Oops, kind of messed it up there. I'm just going to fix it. There we go. And there we go. So you should end up with a really nice uniform piece of wire. And maybe while we're in up close mode, I'll just go ahead and grab this other side with some pliers and just twist it. And you can see that pulls it in and gets it nice and tight. And so I'm just going to keep doing that. Get some more light in here until it gets totally uniform. And that's basically the maximum. So just twist it up. Try not to let it break because it's kind of a risk. But that's about as tight as it's going to get, and tightening it up like that helps for this to conduct electricity as one piece rather than separately, and then you end up with hot spots and stuff. So let me go ahead and wrap up a coil. So here's both of the Helix wires that we made in this video compared to each other. And the coolest thing about Helix wire is that the curve, or the twists, it actually creates some really nice juice channels all throughout the wire. And with the Clapton, it actually, it's pretty crazy the amount of juice channels that are in there, because you got the outside Clapton portion, there's grooves between there, and then also the actual curvature of the wire itself, which holds onto juice within those other spaces. So the original Helix wire worked really well, and I was excited when I came upon that one. And then all the different variations, I mean, it's basically limitless possibilities of different variations that you could do. So really there's nothing different between wrapping this coil and wrapping up the regular Helix wire. You don't want to let this core wire twist around as you're wrapping it, and you just kind of take it one little piece at a time. It's going to be a lot softer though, just because it is that Nichrome core. But with a little practice, it becomes pretty easy to get it nice and even the first time. Go ahead and try to do 5 wraps. Hopefully we'll be able to fit it in the atomizer. So it gets lined up really nicely, as long as you get those twists even from the beginning. And then the performance on this, as far as flavor goes, is really, really nice. I always enjoy a Clapton Helix, so let's go ahead and mount it in to the atomizer. Okay, so I got the Cabron ready here, and I'm just going to go ahead and slip this wire through those post holes, and that's why big post holes come in handy with this kind of twisted wire, because the resistance isn't necessarily going to be a lot lower than a regular build with just like twisted 26 gauge or even 24 gauge, but since those Claptons add so much diameter to this wire, it's nice to have a post hole that's big enough to fit it through there, you know. So what I'm going to do is actually just push this right over, and let me grab the tool, which I forgot to grab. Hold on. Okay, so I got the tool, and I'm just going to push this again as close as I can to that post, the center post, and then I'm just going to go ahead and screw this down. And it's important to get this tight so it clamps down through all of those twisted wires and gets a good connection. Get this up, and hopefully we can push it over enough to fit it in the deck. And that's what's cool about the El Cabron, is that the AFC is really thin, so you can build it all the way up to the edge of this, the edge of the deck, and it's still going to fit and not hit the coil. I'm not sure if we can get 5 wraps though. Yep, it should work. Alright. I'm going to hold that in place while I just go ahead and tighten this down. And then make sure that when I wiggle this, those other wires aren't moving. Looks like we got a good connection. Should be able to just force this over. It's really overhanging. I'm going to pull a wrap out. So to adjust it and change it from a 5 wrap to a 4 wrap, what I'm going to do is get that screw loosened up. and just bend it a little bit. And just pull this wire out. Oops. Luckily, looks like I was able to adjust that enough, so we can probably tighten it up. I'm just going to pull it through here. Get it through the center post, and then just yank on it. There we go. And then to tighten it up, stick it through the other side here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. There we go. Clip off the leads. Alright. We should be able to tighten it up a little bit more even. Now with a 4-wrap, obviously the resistance has gone down quite a bit. We'll ohm it out in a second after we dry fire it. And with a lot of coils, I mean, that looks pretty good from the get-go, just because there's some space between that wire. Why don't we just make it a spaced coil? And a lot of coils you can strum them to get the hot spots out. With clapton wires, I prefer not to. Just because it ends up messing up the claptons. Looks pretty good though. Double check for top cap clearance here. Sorry, this part took a little bit longer than I expected. Pop off the AFC. We can see you can see the coil through there. And you can see this not going to be hitting the top cap. So we got top cap clearance. Let's go ahead and wick it up. Okay, so I got the wick ready. I'm just going to slip it through. Basically wick all my coils the same. And now just be careful when you pull your wick through though. Make sure not to jostle that coil too much because it can adjust and start shorting out between itself, and you can end up with hot spots just through the wicking process. So if you're getting, after wicking and juicing and everything, if you're getting like a harshness in the throat that's not normal for the kind of juice that you're using, I'd recommend just taking the wick out, dry firing it again, making sure you don't just have hot spots that they got created when you jostled the coil wicking it. Not a lot of clearance, but we should be able to get it. There we go. Throw some chocolatey flavor in here. Got some more NATO from Possum Trot. It's delicious. Fill up the juice well. Test fire it.